She thought the knock at 2 a.m. was death coming for her. Through the peephole, she saw him, the Mafia boss whose mansion she cleaned, the man who could make people disappear with a phone call, standing in her hallway like a ghost. Her hands shook on the deadbolt. "Mr. Volkov, did I do something wrong?" "No." His voice cracked. I can't sleep." The most dangerous man in the city, confessing his weakness at her door. She should have slammed it shut. Should have pretended this never happened. Instead, she let him in. What Helen didn't know was that 3 men were watching from across the street. And by morning, her face would be on every hit list in the city. Because the Mafia doesn't forgive vulnerability. And she'd just become his. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you are hooked in and ready to enjoy the story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments section where you are watching from, because tomorrow I'll be giving you an interesting story such as this one and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. Alexei Volkov. The name people whispered with equal parts fear and reverence. The man who controlled half the city's underground, who could make people disappear with a phone call, who walked through the world like he owned it, because he did. But Helen knew something no one else did. She knew he was lonely. She saw it in the way his coffee cup was always left on the same spot on the kitchen island, as if he'd been sitting there for hours. She saw it in the books stacked beside his bed, spines unbroken, like he bought them hoping they'd cure something words couldn't reach. She saw it in the prescription bottles in the bathroom cabinet. Sleeping pills, half empty, refilled monthly. The bus hissed to a stop. Helen stood, her knees protesting, and stepped into the cold October air. Her apartment was 3 blocks away, in a building that leaned slightly to the left, where the elevator hadn't worked in 4 years and the hallway always smelled like boiled cabbage and regret. She climbed the 5 flights of stairs slowly, keys already in her hand. The lock stuck the way it always did. She shouldered the door open and stepped into her tiny studio, 300 square feet of her entire world. A twin bed pushed against the wall. A kitchenette with 2 burners. A single window overlooking the alley where the dumpsters lived. She dropped her purse on the counter and filled the kettle. Tea. Always tea before bed, even though bed was only 3 hours away before she had to wake up and do it all over again. The water boiled. She poured it over the bag, watching the color bleed into the water like a slow bruise. She thought about Alexei Volkov's kitchen, about the imported Italian espresso machine that probably cost more than her car, about the marble countertop she'd wiped down while he was God knows where, doing God knows what to God knows who. She didn't judge him. She couldn't afford to. Judgment was a luxury for people with choices. She sipped her tea and stared at the photograph on her makeshift shelf. Her son, Elijah, at 17. Bright-eyed, smiling, wearing the graduation cap he never got to keep because 3 months later, he was gone. Swallowed by the streets, by a system that saw black boys as problems to solve, not people to save. 10 years now. 10 years of that empty space in her chest that nothing could fill. She finished her tea, washed the cup, and lay down on her bed without undressing. Sleep came fast, the way it did when your body was too exhausted to fight it. Across the city, Alexei Volkov stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, staring at the skyline like it owed him answers. He hadn't slept in 47 hours. The insomnia had started 3 years ago, after Sophia. After his daughter's funeral, after the guilt became a living thing that crawled into bed with him every night and whispered her name until dawn. He'd tried everything. Pills that left him groggy but awake. Whiskey that numbed him but didn't silence the thoughts. Women who warmed his bed but left him colder. Therapy, 1 session, because the therapist looked at him like he was a problem to solve, and Alexei didn't pay people to fix him. He paid people to fear him. But fear didn't cure insomnia. He turned away from the window and paced the length of his living room. 30 feet of Italian leather, Persian rugs, art that cost more than most people's homes. It was a museum, a mausoleum, a monument to everything he'd built and nothing he'd kept. His phone buzzed. A text from Dimitri, his lieutenant. The Castellano shipment is delayed. Waiting on your call. He ignored it. His mind drifted, the way it always did in the small hours, to the maid. Helen. He didn't know her last name. Didn't know anything about her except that she showed up every week, cleaned his house in silence, and left before he had to acknowledge her existence. But he noticed her. The way she moved through his home like she was trying not to disturb the air. The way her hands never stopped moving, always scrubbing, polishing, erasing. The way she never looked him in the eye the few times their paths had crossed. And he noticed the sadness. It clung to her the way his clung to him. He didn't know why he thought of her now. Maybe because she was the only person who entered his world and didn't want anything from him. Didn't fear him, didn't flatter him, didn't try to use him. She just existed in his space, and then she left. He grabbed his keys. It was an impulse. A stupid, reckless impulse born from 47 hours of no sleep and a mind that wouldn't stop screaming. But he was moving before he could talk himself out of it. Down the elevator, into his car, onto the empty streets. He didn't know her address. But his head of security did. Everyone who worked for him was vetted, documented, tracked. He made the call. 20 minutes later, he was standing outside a building that looked like it should have been condemned, staring at a directory that was missing half its labels. 5th floor. Apartment 5C. He climbed the stairs, his footsteps echoing in the stairwell. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of old cooking and mildew clung to the walls. He stood outside her door, his hand raised to knock, and for the first time in years, Alexei Volkov hesitated. What the hell am I doing? But the insomnia roared louder than reason. He knocked. 3 times. Firm but not aggressive. Then he waited, his heart doing something strange in his chest, something that felt almost like fear. Inside, Helen woke with a gasp. Her first thought was fire. Her second was police. Her third was that she'd finally done something wrong enough that the universe had come to collect. She sat up, her heart hammering, and stared at her door like it might explode. The knock came again. Same rhythm. Patient but insistent. She checked her phone. 2:17 a.m. Nobody knocked at 2:17 a.m. with good news. She stood slowly, her legs unsteady, and crept toward the door. Her hand hovered over the deadbolt. Who is it? Her voice cracked. Silence. Then, it's Alexei Volkov. Her blood turned to ice. She thought she'd misheard. She must have. Because there was no universe in which Alexei Volkov, the man whose toilet she scrubbed, whose floor she mopped, whose world she only ever saw through the lens of service, was standing outside her apartment at 2 a.m. Miss Helen. His voice was quieter now, almost uncertain. I know this is. I need to speak with you. Her hands shook as she undid the chain, the deadbolt, the lock that always stuck. She opened the door just wide enough to see him. And there he was. Alexei Volkov. 6 feet of controlled danger, dark hair slightly disheveled, wearing a black coat that probably cost more than her yearly rent. But it was his eyes that stopped her. They were red-rimmed, shadowed, haunted. He looked like a man who'd been awake for days. He looked like a man drowning. Mr. Volkov. She didn't know what else to say. Her mind couldn't process this. Is everything all right? Did I do something wrong? No. He shook his head quickly. No, you didn't do anything wrong. They stood there, staring at each other across the threshold of her world and his. Then, why are you here? She gripped the edge of the door, her knuckles white. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away, down the hallway, then back at her. And when he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost didn't hear it. I can't sleep. What would you do if someone confessed their deepest vulnerability to you at 2 a.m.? Would you let them in or shut the door? Let me know below. Backhand index pointing down. Helen stared at him, her brain trying to catch up with her ears. You can't sleep, she repeated slowly, like she was translating a foreign language. Yes. And you came here. To my apartment. At 2 in the morning. Yes. She blinked. Once. Twice. Waiting for the punchline, the threat, the reality that made sense. But Alexei Volkov just stood there in her doorway, looking like a man who'd walked to the edge of the world and found nothing but empty air. I don't understand. Her voice was barely a whisper. I don't either. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so human it startled her. I was in my apartment and I couldn't. He stopped, his jaw tightening. I needed to not be alone. The confession hung between them like something fragile and dangerous. Helen's first instinct was to close the door. Lock it. Pretend this never happened. Because men like Alexei Volkov didn't show up at the homes of women like her with anything good. They showed up with demands, with threats, with the kind of attention that ruined lives. But she'd cleaned his home for 2 years. She'd seen the pills. She'd seen the untouched bed, the cold kitchen, the photographs of a little girl with dark curls who smiled in every picture. A little girl who wasn't anywhere in that mansion anymore. She'd seen the loneliness. And God help her, she recognized it. Mr. Volkov, she started, trying to find the words that would send him away safely, that wouldn't offend him, that wouldn't make this worse. Alexei, he interrupted. Please. Just. Alexei. Something in his voice cracked, and she felt it in her chest. She stepped back. Opened the door wider. Come in. He entered her apartment like he was stepping into a church. Careful, reverent, aware that he didn't belong. His eyes swept the space in one quick assessment. The twin bed with its faded quilt, the kitchenette with mismatched mugs drying by the sink, the photograph on the shelf, the window with its view of nothing. It was smaller than his closet. Smaller than his bathroom. It was everything his world wasn't. Cramped, worn, real. Sit, Helen said, gesturing to the only chair she had. A wooden thing with a cushion that had seen better decades. He sat. She stood by the counter, arms wrapped around herself, maintaining distance because proximity felt dangerous. The silence stretched. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. The building's pipes groaned. The radiator hissed. Would you like tea? She asked finally, because it was the only thing she could think to offer. Tea, he repeated, like he'd never heard the word before. Yes. Thank you. She filled the kettle again, her hands steadier now that she had a task. She could feel his eyes on her, watching her move through her tiny kingdom. She pulled 2 mugs from the dish rack. One said, "World's Best Mom" in faded letters. The other was plain white with a chip on the rim. The water boiled. She poured. The steam rose between them like a veil. She handed him the chipped mug and took the other for herself, finally sitting on the edge of her bed, facing him. They were 4 feet apart. It felt like miles and inches at the same time. How long? She asked. How long what? Since you slept. He looked down at his tea, watching the steam curl. 2 days. Maybe 3. I lose track. That's not sustainable. I know. You'll get sick. I know. She sipped her tea. He didn't touch his. Why me? The question came out before she could stop it. Why did you come here? You have people. Resources. Doctors who could. They don't help. His voice was flat. The pills make me groggy. The therapy makes me angry. The people. He trailed off, his jaw working. The people around me want things. They want my money, my power, my favor. They look at me and see what I can do for them. And what do you think I see? He looked up then, meeting her eyes for the first time since he'd entered her home. I don't know. That's why I'm here. The honesty of it stole her breath. You clean my house, he continued, his voice low and rough. Every week. You see where I live, how I live. You never ask questions. Never stare. Never want anything. You just do your job and leave. And I thought. He stopped, shook his head. I thought maybe near someone who doesn't want to take something from me, I could finally breathe. Helen set her mug down carefully on the floor. Her hands were trembling again. Mr. Vol Alexei. His name felt strange on her tongue, too intimate, too equal. I'm your maid. I clean your toilets. I scrub your floors. We're not friends. We're not anything. I know. Then why are you really here? He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers wrapped around the mug he still hadn't tasted. When he spoke, his voice was barely audible. Because 3 years ago, my daughter died. And every night since then I see her. I hear her. I feel her in every empty room of that God-forsaken house. And tonight I couldn't. His voice broke. I couldn't be there anymore. I couldn't be alone with it anymore. The grief in his voice was so raw, so naked, that Helen felt tears spring to her eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't. He shook his head sharply. Don't pity me. I don't deserve it. I deserve every sleepless night. Every minute of this hell. Why do you say that? His laugh was bitter, ugly. Because I killed her. The words dropped like stones into water. Helen leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. How? I wasn't there. He stared at his hands like they were stained with something he could never wash off. She was sick. The flu, they said. Just the flu. But I had a meeting. A deal. Something more important than reading her bedtime stories. And by the time I got home, she was. He couldn't finish. She was gone. That's not. It is. His eyes flashed with something fierce and broken. It is my fault. Because I chose wrong. I always choose wrong. And now she's gone and I can't sleep, and I can't fix it, and I can't. Breathe, Helen interrupted, standing and moving toward him without thinking. You need to breathe. He was gasping, his chest heaving, his hand shaking so badly the tea sloshed over the rim of the mug. She took it from him gently and set it on the floor, then knelt in front of him, her hands hovering near his knees, not touching but close. Look at me, she said softly. Alexei. Look at me. He did. His eyes were wild, panicked, drowning. Breathe with me. In. She inhaled slowly. Out. She exhaled. He tried. Failed. Tried again. Slowly, the panic receded. They stayed like that, her kneeling, him sitting, their breath sinking in the quiet of her small apartment while the city slept around them. I lost my son, Helen said finally, her voice steady but thick with old pain. 10 years ago. Elijah. He was 17. Alexei's eyes focused on her, really seeing her for the first time. He was smart. So smart. Full of dreams. But the world didn't care about his dreams. The world saw a black boy in a hoodie and decided he was dangerous. And one night, the wrong cop, the wrong moment. She swallowed hard. They said it was justified. They always say it's justified. Helen. I blamed myself for years, she continued. I thought if I'd worked less, been home more, kept him on a shorter leash, maybe he'd still be here. But grief doesn't work that way. It doesn't care about logic. It just sits in your chest and makes a home. How do you survive it? I don't know if you do, she admitted. I think you just learn to carry it. Some days are lighter than others. Some nights, I still wake up and forget he's gone. And then I remember, and it's like losing him all over again. Does it get better? She looked at him, this powerful, dangerous man reduced to the same question she'd asked herself 1,000 times, and told him the truth. No. But you get stronger. A tear slipped down his cheek. Just one. He wiped it away quickly, like he was ashamed. Stay, Helen said quietly. Just for tonight. Sleep on the bed. I'll take the chair. You need rest. I can't take your bed. You can and you will. You came here because you needed something. Let me give you this one thing. Let someone take care of you for once. He stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, gratitude, something softer than she'd ever seen in him. Okay, he whispered. She stood, grabbed a spare blanket from the closet, and gestured to the bed. He moved like he was in a dream, lying down on top of the covers fully clothed, his expensive coat pooling around him. Helen settled into the chair with the blanket, turning off the lamp. Darkness filled the room. Helen. His voice drifted through the dark. Yeah. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We'll see if you actually sleep. Silence. Then, softer than a prayer. I already feel different. She closed her eyes and listened to his breathing slow, deepen, settle. And for the first time in 47 hours, Alexei Volkov slept. And for the first time in 10 years, Helen didn't feel completely alone. Helen woke to the pale gray light of dawn filtering through her window. Her neck ached from the angle she'd slept at, her back protesting as she shifted in the chair. For a moment, she forgot. Forgot the knock, forgot the confession, forgot the man sleeping in her bed. Then she turned her head. Alexei Volkov was still there, curled slightly on his side, one arm tucked under the pillow, his face smoothed of the tension that had carved lines into it just hours before. He looked younger in sleep. Almost peaceful. Almost human. The sight of him there, in her space, in her bed, vulnerable, sent a jolt of panic through her chest. What have I done? She stood carefully, her joints popping in the quiet. The floorboard creaked. Alexei stirred but didn't wake. She moved to the kitchenette, filling the kettle as quietly as possible, needing something to do with her hands, needing to think. This was dangerous. Not just because he was who he was, a man who could ruin her life with a phone call, but because of what had happened last night. The walls had come down. She'd seen him broken, and he'd seen her grief. They'd stood on equal ground for a few stolen hours, and that equality was a lie they couldn't afford to believe. The kettle began to hiss. She turned off the flame before it could whistle. Behind her, she heard movement. The rustle of fabric. A sharp intake of breath. She turned to find Alexei sitting up, disoriented, his eyes scanning the unfamiliar room before landing on her. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The morning light was unforgiving, exposing the impossibility of what had happened. You slept, she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. He ran a hand over his face, through his hair. I did. He sounded surprised. Almost suspicious. That's good. Yes. He stood, smoothing down his coat, his walls already rebuilding themselves brick by brick. I should go. Okay. He moved toward the door, then paused, his hand on the knob. He turned back to her, his expression unreadable. What happened last night? doesn't leave this room, Helen finished. I know. Something flickered across his face. Relief? Disappointment? She couldn't tell. Thank you, he said stiffly. You already said that. I mean it. I know. He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him with a finality that felt like a coffin closing. Helen stood in the center of her apartment, listening to his footsteps fade down the hallway, down the stairs, back to his world. She poured herself tea she didn't drink and stared at her bed, at the indent where his body had been, at the proof that last night had actually happened. Then she stripped the sheets. By the time Helen arrived at the Volkov mansion 3 days later for her regular cleaning shift, she'd almost convinced herself it had been a dream. A strange, impossible dream brought on by exhaustion and loneliness. But when she let herself in through the service entrance, her hands were shaking. The house was silent. It always was. But today the silence felt heavier, watching her. She started in the kitchen, the way she always did. Wiped down the counters that were already spotless. Organized the pantry that was already organized. Scrubbed the sink that didn't need scrubbing. Busy work. Safe work. She was on her hands and knees, cleaning the grout between the tiles, when she heard footsteps. Her heart stopped. Dmitri needs the car brought around. Alexei's voice, clipped and cold, speaking to someone else. And tell him I want the numbers from the shipment before noon. Yes, sir. Another voice. Male. Deferential. Helen stayed perfectly still, hidden behind the kitchen island, praying he wouldn't come in, wouldn't see her, wouldn't acknowledge what had happened. The footsteps passed. A door closed. Silence returned. She released a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. For the next 4 hours, she cleaned with the focus of a woman trying to erase her own existence. She saw Alexei twice more, once in the hallway, where he walked past her like she was furniture, and once through the window as she cleaned the second-floor study, watching him pace in the garden below, phone pressed to his ear, his face hard with whatever violence his world demanded. He never looked up. By the time she finished, it was clear. Whatever had happened that night, whatever vulnerability had driven him to her door, was gone. Buried. Denied. And that should have been a relief. It should have been. Across the city, in the penthouse that felt more like a prison with every passing hour, Alexei poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey and tried to convince himself he'd done the right thing. Ignoring her had been necessary. Strategic. Safe. Because acknowledging her, acknowledging what had happened, what he'd confessed, how she'd made him feel, would open a door he couldn't afford to walk through. Men in his position didn't have friends. They had assets and liabilities. They had leverage and weakness. And Helen. Helen was neither and both. She was a vulnerability he couldn't afford. Boss. Dmitri appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. We need to talk. Alexei downed the whiskey. About you being distracted. Dmitri stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. About you leaving the house at 2 a.m. 3 nights ago and not telling anyone where you were going. About you disappearing off the grid for 3 hours. Alexei's blood ran cold. I went for a drive. For 3 hours. To where? Nowhere. Everywhere. I needed to clear my head. Dimitri's eyes narrowed. The Castellanos are getting bold. They're pushing into our territory, testing our boundaries. This is not the time for you to be unfocused. I'm not unfocused. You're sleeping during the day now. You're distracted. I'm fine, Alexei snapped, his voice sharp enough to cut. Handle the Castellanos. That's what I pay you for. Dmitri held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. As you wish. When he left, Alexei poured another drink. The insomnia had returned the moment he'd walked out of Helen's apartment. The second night, he'd barely slept 2 hours. Last night, none at all. His body ached for the peace he'd felt in her small bed, in her small room, with her quiet presence nearby. But peace was a luxury he couldn't afford. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You look tired today." His heart lurched. He stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. "How did you get this number?" "From the contact sheet you give all your staff. In case of emergencies." This isn't an emergency. Isn't it? He should delete the message. Block the number. Maintain the distance he'd worked so hard to create. Instead he typed, "I'm fine. Liar." Despite everything. His mouth curved into something almost like a smile. "Go to bed. Helen. You first." He didn't respond. But he didn't delete the thread either. The whispers started 2 days later. Helen heard them in the break room at the cleaning company, in the sidelong glances from the other maids, in the way conversations stopped when she entered. "I heard Volkov's been acting strange," someone murmured. "Maybe he's sick. Maybe he's finally losing it. Men like that always do eventually." Helen kept her head down, packed her supplies, and left without engaging. But the unease followed her. That night, her phone buzzed. "I need to see you." Her hands trembled as she read the message. Then reread it. "No. Please. This isn't safe. For either of us." "I know." "Then why are you asking?" The response took longer this time. "Because I can't sleep again. And I can't stop thinking about the one night I could." Helen closed her eyes, pressed her phone to her chest, and felt the dangerous thing growing between them. The thing that had no name, no future, no place in either of their worlds. She should say no. She should block his number. She should protect herself from the inevitable destruction that came from crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. Instead, she typed, "Not at my place. Too obvious if someone's watching you." "Where?" "There's a diner on 5th and Broadway. 24 hours. Meet me there in an hour." "Thank you." "Don't thank me. This is a mistake." "I know." She stared at the screen until it went dark, then she grabbed her jacket and headed out into the night, toward the mistake she couldn't stop herself from making. Because she couldn't sleep either. Because for a few hours, she hadn't felt invisible. Because loneliness was its own kind of death, and maybe they were both just trying to survive. Have you ever known something was a bad idea but done it anyway because the alternative felt worse? Share your thoughts below. Backhand index pointing down. The diner was the kind of place that thrived on invisibility. Cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lights that buzzed with a frequency that made your teeth ache, and a waitress who'd seen enough of life to stop asking questions. Helen sat in the back corner booth, nursing a coffee that had gone cold 10 minutes ago. She checked her phone. 3:47 a.m. He was late. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Maybe he'd realized how insane this was. Maybe. The bell above the door chimed. Alexei stepped inside, and even in this forgotten place, he looked out of place. Too sharp. Too expensive. Too alive. He scanned the room once, a habit, she realized, something men like him did without thinking, and his eyes found hers. He slid into the booth across from her without a word. The waitress appeared, poured him coffee without asking, and disappeared again. "You came," Helen said. "You thought I wouldn't? I thought you'd come to your senses." "I did." He wrapped his hands around the mug. "That's why I'm here." They sat in silence, the diner's ancient jukebox playing something from the 70s, all heartbreak and guitar. "This is dangerous," Helen said finally. "People are already talking. Your people. My people. If anyone sees us." "I know." Do you? Because I don't think you understand what happens to someone like me when someone like you decides to play games. You'll be fine. You're always fine. But me? I lose everything. His jaw tightened. This isn't a game. Then what is it? I don't know. His voice was raw with frustration. I don't know what this is. I just know that for the first time in 3 years, I felt something other than guilt. And I can't. He stopped, his hands tightening around the mug. I can't go back to how it was before. Helen's heart hammered against her ribs. Alexei. The bell above the door chimed again. 3 men entered. They didn't look at the menu. They looked at Alexei. Helen saw the change in him instantly. The way his spine straightened, the way his face went blank, the way his hand moved subtly toward his coat pocket. Boss. The tallest one approached their booth. We have a situation. Not now, Pavel. It can't wait. Pavel's eyes flicked to Helen, assessing, dismissing. The Castellanos hit the warehouse on 9th. They took the shipment and left a message. Alexei's expression darkened. What kind of message? The kind written in blood. Helen felt ice crawl down her spine. Alexei stood, threw a $50 bill on the table. Too much for 2 coffees, but men like him didn't count change, and looked at her. Stay here. I'll handle this. No. Pavel stepped closer, his voice low but firm. She comes with us. Excuse me. Helen found her voice, indignation cutting through fear. She was seen with you. Pavel's tone was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. In public. At 4 a.m. If the Castellanos are making moves, they'll look for leverage. That makes her a target. I'm not, Helen started. He's right. Alexei's voice was flat, controlled, but she could see the fury burning beneath. We need to move. Now. 20 minutes later, Helen found herself in a car that cost more than her entire building, sandwiched between Alexei and Pavel, speeding through empty streets towards somewhere she didn't know. This is insane, she said for the 3rd time. I don't know anything. I'm not involved in whatever. They don't care. Pavel didn't look at her. They see you with him, that's enough. Take her to the safe house on Riverside, Alexei ordered. No one knows about it except us. For how long? Helen demanded. Until we neutralize the threat. That could be days. Weeks. I have a job. I have. You have your life. Alexei finally looked at her, and his eyes were hard. Would you prefer to keep your job or keep breathing? She fell silent. The safe house was a brownstone in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be upscale but hadn't quite made it. 3 stories, narrow windows, a door painted navy blue. Pavel did another sweep of the street before ushering them inside. The interior was sparse but clean, furniture that looked expensive but unlived in, walls bare of photographs or personality, everything chosen for function over feeling. I'll be outside, Pavel said. 2 more men on rotation. Don't go near the windows. Don't open the door for anyone except me or the boss. Then he was gone, and Helen was alone with Alexei in a house that felt like a very nice cage. She turned on him. This is your fault. I know. I told you this was dangerous. I know. I could lose everything because you couldn't handle a little insomnia. I know. His voice cracked through the room like a whip, and she flinched. He saw it, and something in him crumbled. I know, he repeated quieter. I'm sorry. I didn't think. I wasn't thinking. I just. You just what? I just wanted to feel human again. He sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. For a few hours. That's all. And now I've dragged you into this and I can't undo it and I. He looked up at her, and the anguish in his face was so profound it hurt to witness. I'm sorry, Helen. She wanted to stay angry. Anger was safe. Anger kept distance. But she was so tired of distance. She sat down beside him, careful to leave space between them. Tell me about the Castellanos. Why? Because if I'm stuck here until you neutralize the threat, I should at least know what threat we're talking about. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. They're a rival family. We've had an uneasy peace for 5 years. Territories divided, business separate. But 6 months ago, their old boss died. His son took over. Young, ambitious, stupid. He wants to prove himself. By going after you. By going after everything I have. And now he thinks I'm part of what you have. Yes. Helen leaned back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. How did my life become a mob movie? Despite everything, Alexei's mouth twitched. I ask myself the same thing every day. Yeah, but you chose this. Did I? His voice went distant. My father was Vorvizak I, thief-in-law. I was 12 when I watched him kill a man in our kitchen. 15 when he put a gun in my hand and told me to use it. 18 when I took over his territory because he was too drunk to hold it. I've been drowning in this life since before I knew what choice meant. You could leave. No. His voice was absolute. I couldn't. Men like me don't retire. We die or we're overthrown. Those are the only exits. That's a sad way to live. It's the only way I know. They sat in silence, the weight of their respective prisons settling around them. I need to call my supervisor, Helen said finally. Tell her I'm sick. Make sure I don't lose my job. Use my phone. Yours might be compromised. She took his phone, sleek, expensive, password protected until he unlocked it, and made the call. She lied smoothly about stomach flu, about needing a few days, about being sorry for the inconvenience. Years of being invisible had made her an excellent liar. When she hung up, Alexei was watching her. What? She asked. You're good at that. At what? Pretending everything's fine when it's not. I've had a lot of practice. Me too. Their eyes held, and something unspoken passed between them. Recognition, understanding, the shared knowledge of what it cost to survive in worlds that didn't want you. Are you hungry? Alexei asked, standing. The kitchen should be stocked. You cook. I can manage not to burn water. They moved to the kitchen, and it was strange, domestic, surreal. Alexei found eggs, bread, cheese. Helen found herself standing beside him at the stove, guiding his hands as he tried to make an omelette. More butter, she instructed. That seems like too much butter. Trust me. He added more butter. The egg sizzled. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and ordinary and impossibly comforting. They ate at the small table by the window, the one they weren't supposed to go near, keeping to the shadows but drawn to the light. When was the last time someone cooked for you? Helen asked. My daughter. She used to make me breakfast. Burnt toast and undercooked eggs, but she was so proud. His voice softened with memory. She'd bring it to me on a tray with a flower in a cup, and I'd eat every bite. What was her name? Sophia. He smiled, and it was the first real smile she'd seen from him. After my grandmother. She had dark hair like me, but her mother's green eyes. She loved books, horses, drawing. She wanted to be an artist. She sounds wonderful. She was. His smile faded. She was everything good about me. Everything I could have been if I'd made different choices. You still have time to make different choices. Do I? He looked at her, and the question was genuine. Sometimes I think I'm too far gone. Too much blood on my hands. Too many bodies buried. How do you come back from that? I don't know if you come back. But maybe you move forward. Maybe you try to be better than you were yesterday. Is that what you do? Every day. She set down her fork. Every day I wake up and I choose to keep going, even though my son is gone, even though the world took him from me, even though it would be easier to just stop. But I keep going because stopping would mean they won. And I refuse to let them win. You're stronger than me. No. She shook her head. I'm just more stubborn. He laughed, a real laugh, surprised and warm, and the sound transformed his face. They cleaned up together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with an ease that shouldn't have existed between them but somehow did. There are 2 bedrooms upstairs, Alexei said when they finished. You should rest. It's been a long night. What about you? I'll stay down here. Keep watch. Alexei. She touched his arm and he stilled. When was the last time you slept without exhausting yourself first? That night in your apartment. Then come upstairs. We'll figure out the sleeping arrangements. But you need rest. He looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. They climbed the stairs together, found the 2 bedrooms. Mirror images of each other, impersonal and clean. Good night, Helen, Alexei said from his doorway. Good night, Alexei. But as she lay in the unfamiliar bed, listening to the sounds of him settling in the room next door, she realized something that terrified her. She didn't feel trapped. She felt safer than she had in years. Helen woke to the sound of breaking glass. She bolted upright, her heart in her throat, disoriented by the unfamiliar room, the filtered afternoon light, the silence that followed the crash. Then she remembered. The safe house. The Castellanos. Alexei. She threw off the covers and rushed into the hallway. Alexei's door was open, his bed empty. Another sound from downstairs, not breaking this time, but movement, footsteps, the scrape of something heavy across the floor. She crept down the stairs, her pulse hammering in her ears. The living room was empty, but the kitchen door was ajar, and through it she could see him. Alexei stood amid shattered glass and scattered groceries, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. A bottle of wine had fallen, or been thrown, and dark red liquid spread across the white tile like blood. Alexei. Her voice was soft, careful. He didn't look up. I'm sorry. I was trying to put it away. My hands. He flexed his fingers. I haven't slept. I can't think straight. She moved into the kitchen, stepping carefully around the glass. How long have you been awake? I don't know. I lay down. I closed my eyes. But every time I started to drift, I saw her. Sophia. And I heard it again. Heard what? His jaw worked. He shook his head. Alexei. She moved closer, close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. What did you hear? The monitor. His voice cracked. The baby monitor. It was still on when I came home that night. And I heard it. I heard the moment she stopped breathing. I heard her silence. And I was in my car, 10 minutes away, arguing with Paolo Castellano about territory and money and shit that doesn't matter, and my daughter was dying. The anguish in his voice was so raw that Helen felt it like a physical blow. I heard her die, he whispered. And I did nothing. You didn't know. I should have known. He slammed his hand against the counter, and she jumped. I'm sorry, he said immediately, his voice shaking. I'm sorry. I can't. Come here. She took his hand, led him away from the glass to the couch. Sit. Just sit. He sank down, and she disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a towel and a glass of water. She pressed the water into his hands. "Drink." He obeyed like a child. She knelt in front of him, the same position she'd been in that first night in her apartment, grounding him with her presence. "Tell me about her. Not about how she died. About how she lived." "Why?" "Because she was more than that one moment. And so are you." He stared at her for a long moment, then began to speak. "She was born in December, a week before Christmas. The doctor said she wouldn't make it. Complications during delivery, not enough oxygen, but she was a fighter. Screamed her way into the world and never stopped fighting." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Her mother left when Sophia was 2. Couldn't handle this life. Couldn't handle me. I don't blame her. But Sophia stayed." "What was she like?" "Curious. Fearless. She'd ask 1,000 questions about everything. Why is the sky blue? Where do birds sleep? Do fish get thirsty?" He laughed softly. "I didn't know most of the answers, so we'd look them up together. She loved that. Learning new things. She had notebooks full of facts she thought were important." "Like what?" "Like octopuses have 3 hearts. Like honey never spoils. Like there are more stars in the universe than grains of sand on Earth." His voice grew thick. "She said that meant we were never alone. That somewhere up there, someone was looking at the same stars." Helen's eyes burned with tears. She wanted to go to art school. Paris, specifically. She'd never been, but she'd seen pictures and decided that was where artists belonged. I was going to take her. For her 18th birthday. We had plans. He looked at Helen, and his face was devastated. "We had so many plans. I'm so sorry." The night she died, she'd called me. I was in the meeting with Castellano, and I saw her name on the screen, and I sent it to voicemail. His voice broke completely. "I sent my dying daughter to voicemail because a business deal was more important." "Alexei, you didn't know." "I listened to it later. The voicemail. She said, 'Daddy, I don't feel good. Can you come home?' That was it. Just, 'Can you come home?'" Tears streamed down his face unchecked. "And I didn't. I finished my meeting. I closed my deal. And when I got home, she was already gone." Helen didn't think. She just moved, wrapping her arms around him as he shattered. He buried his face in her shoulder and sobbed. Great, wrenching sounds that came from somewhere deep and buried. Grief that had been locked away for 3 years finally breaking free. She held him and let him break. "It's not your fault," she whispered against his hair. "It's not your fault." "It is." "No." She pulled back, gripping his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. "Listen to me. Children get sick. Children die. It's unfair and it's wrong and it's not supposed to happen, but it does. And it is not your fault. If I'd been there, maybe nothing would have changed. Maybe you would have watched her die and been helpless anyway. Or maybe you would have gotten her to the hospital and they still couldn't save her. You don't know. And torturing yourself with what ifs won't bring her back. Then what do I do?" His voice was desperate, pleading. "How do I live with this?" "The same way I live with losing Elijah. One breath at a time. One day at a time. And you forgive yourself, even though it feels impossible." "I don't deserve forgiveness. None of us do. That's the point. Forgiveness isn't about deserving. It's about surviving." He stared at her, and something shifted in his expression. Understanding, maybe, or the first fragile seed of hope. "Tell me about Elijah," he said quietly. She hesitated, then nodded. She owed him this, reciprocal vulnerability, shared pain. He was sunshine, she began, a sad smile touching her lips. From the moment he was born, he was just light. Always laughing, always finding joy in small things. He'd bring me dandelions from the yard and call them flowers. He'd make up songs about nothing and sing them at the top of his lungs. What happened to him? He was walking home from his friend's house. It was 8 o'clock at night. A cop saw him, thought he looked suspicious. The old anger rose in her throat like bile. Elijah ran. Not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he was 17 and scared and black, and he knew how these things ended. The cop chased him. Said Elijah reached for something. Said he feared for his life. She swallowed hard. He shot my baby in the back. Jesus! They found a cell phone in Elijah's hand. Just a cell phone. But it didn't matter. The cop was cleared. Said he followed protocol. Said it was a justified shooting. Her voice turned bitter. Justified. Like my son's life was worth less than a mistake. I would kill him. Alexei's voice was flat. Deadly. Tell me his name. I'll kill him. I know you would. But it wouldn't bring Elijah back. It would just add more death to the pile. How are you not consumed by rage? Who says I'm not? She looked at him, and he saw the fury burning behind her eyes, banked but eternal. I'm furious. Every single day. But rage without direction just burns you up from the inside. So I channel it. I volunteer at youth centers. I mentor kids who remind me of Elijah. I fight for justice in small ways because the big ways are rigged against people like me. You're remarkable. I'm tired. The honesty of it surprised even her. I'm so tired of fighting. Of being strong. Of pretending I'm okay when I'm not. She met his eyes. That's why that night, when you showed up at my door, when you said you couldn't sleep, I understood. Because I can't either. Not really. I just got better at pretending. We're quite a pair. Yeah. She laughed, but it was sad. Two broken people trying to hold each other up. Is that what we're doing? I don't know what we're doing. They sat in silence, their shared grief a bridge between them. Fragile but real. I kept her room exactly as it was, Alexei said suddenly. At the mansion. Her drawings on the walls. Her books on the shelves. Her stuffed animals on the bed. I go in there sometimes, late at night, and I just sit, hoping I'll feel her. But it's just a room. She's not there. She's not in the room. Helen placed her hand over his heart. She's here. In every memory, every story, every moment you keep her alive. He covered her hand with his, pressing it against his chest. Do you still feel Elijah? After 10 years. Every day. In songs he used to sing. In faces that look like his. In moments when I think, Elijah would have loved this. She smiled through tears. He doesn't go away. He just becomes part of how you see the world. I want that. I want her to be part of how I see the world, not part of what destroyed it. Then you have to let yourself remember the good without drowning in the bad. You have to let her be more than the worst day of your life. He pulled her closer, and she went, resting her head against his shoulder while he wrapped his arms around her. They stayed like that, two people learning that shared grief was somehow lighter than grief carried alone. Outside, the sun shifted lower in the sky. Pavel knocked once, checking in, then left them alone. Thank you, Alexei whispered into her hair. For what? For seeing me. Not the boss, not the criminal, not the monster. Just me. Thank you for the same. They held each other as the afternoon turned to evening, as the shadows grew long, as something deeper than attraction and more dangerous than friendship took root between them. Neither of them named it, but they both felt it growing. The days blurred together in the safe house, time measured not by clocks but by small rituals they invented to fill the waiting. Morning coffee at the kitchen table. Alexei teaching Helen Russian words while she corrected his terrible attempts at making biscuits. Afternoons spent in comfortable silence, her reading books she found on the shelves, him making endless phone calls in hushed tones, managing his empire from a distance. Evenings cooking together, their movements synchronizing in the small kitchen like a dance they'd practiced for years instead of days. It was the fourth night when everything shifted. They just finished dinner, pasta with a sauce Helen had improvised from canned tomatoes and whatever spices she could find, and were sitting on opposite ends of the couch, that careful distance still maintained between them. "Read to me," Alexei said suddenly. Helen looked up from her book. "What?" "Read to me. In English. I want to hear your voice." "That's weird." "Is it?" He tilted his head. "Sophia used to read to me. When she was learning. She'd stumble over words and make up pronunciations, but I loved it. I haven't heard anyone read aloud in 3 years." Something in Helen's chest softened. "Okay." She began reading from where she'd left off, a mystery novel, nothing special, but her voice filled the room with warmth. Alexei closed his eyes and listened, his body gradually relaxing into the couch cushions. She read for 20 minutes before she noticed his breathing had deepened, evened out. She looked over and found him asleep, his face peaceful in a way she'd never seen. She set the book aside carefully and just watched him, this dangerous man who'd somehow become human to her. In sleep, the hardness left him. The lines around his eyes smoothed. He looked younger, softer, like the person he might have been in a different life. She should wake him, send him to bed properly. But she couldn't bring herself to disturb this peace he'd found. Instead, she grabbed the blanket draped over the back of the couch and gently laid it over him. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, a reflex, some deep instinct even sleep couldn't suppress. "It's just me," she whispered. His grip loosened but didn't release. "Stay. Alexei. Please. Just stay close. I sleep better when you're near." She should say no. Should maintain the boundaries that were already dangerously thin. But she was tired of should, tired of boundaries, tired of being alone. She settled back onto the couch, and his hand found hers in the dark, their fingers intertwining like it was the most natural thing in the world. They fell asleep like that, together but not quite, touching but not holding, crossing lines neither of them had permission to cross. Helen woke to the smell of burning. She jerked upright, disoriented by the morning light and the absence of Alexei's hand in hers. Smoke was drifting from the kitchen, followed by a string of Russian curses she didn't need translated. She found Alexei standing over the stove, glaring at a pan of what might have once been eggs but now resembled a blackened crime scene. "I was trying to make you breakfast," he said, sounding almost sheepish. She bit back a laugh. "I can see that. It was supposed to be a surprise." "Oh, it's surprising." She moved to his side, taking the spatula from his hand. "Step aside before you burn the house down." "I followed your instructions exactly. Except for the part where you watched the pan instead of whatever you were doing. I was texting Dmitri about the Castellano situation." "While cooking. I'm a man of many talents. Arson, apparently, is one of them." She scraped the burnt eggs into the trash and started fresh. "Here. Watch. See how I keep the heat medium? And I don't walk away." He leaned against the counter beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, and watched her work with surprising focus. "You make it look easy," he said. "Years of practice. I've been cooking for myself since I was 12. Why so young? My mama worked 3 jobs. I was the oldest. Someone had to make sure my siblings ate. She cracked eggs into the pan, the familiar motion soothing. I used to resent it. All that responsibility. But now. She shrugged. Now I miss having someone to cook for. You're cooking for me. That's different. How? Because you're. She trailed off, realizing she didn't know how to finish that sentence. I'm what? Temporary, she said finally, and something flickered across his face. Hurt, maybe, or disappointment. This whole situation is temporary. Once the thread is handled, we go back to our real lives. And what if I don't want to? Her hand stilled on the spatula. Don't. Don't what? Don't say things like that. She kept her eyes on the eggs. Don't make this more complicated than it already is. Helen. You're you, and I'm me, and there's a whole world between us that doesn't disappear just because we're trapped in a house together for a few days. Her voice was firm, but her hands were shaking. This isn't real. It's just proximity and loneliness and 2 people who don't want to be alone. Is that what you think this is? What else could it be? He was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if it's 2 people who see each other? Really see each other? Not what the world says we should be, but who we actually are. She plated the eggs with more force than necessary. And who are we, Alexei? Really? I don't know yet. But I want to find out. She set the plates on the counter and finally looked at him. This ends badly. You know that, right? There's no version of this story where we both come out okay. Maybe. Or maybe we're both already broken, and the worst has already happened, and we deserve a little happiness before the world comes for us again. That's not how the world works. Then let's make it work differently. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Such a simple gesture, but it sent electricity down her spine. Just for now. Just in this house, in this moment. Let's pretend the world outside doesn't exist. And when we have to go back to it, then we'll face that together too. She wanted to argue, to protect herself, to maintain the walls that had kept her safe for so long. But his hand was still touching her face, and his eyes were asking her to be brave, and she was so tired of being afraid. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Just for now. Just in this house. We can be whatever this is. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise, warm and new and full of impossible hope. They ate breakfast together, and it was different now. The careful distance evaporated. He sat close enough that their knees touched. She didn't move away. He told her stories about Sophia. Not the sad ones, but the funny ones, the ones that made him laugh. She told him about Elijah's obsession with dinosaurs, about the summer he tried to dig for fossils in their tiny backyard and found nothing but rocks he insisted were pre-fossils. He sounds brilliant, Alexei said. He was. He would have been. She caught herself. I do that sometimes. Talk about him in past tense like he's completely gone. But then I remember he's still here, in a way. In me. Sophia's still here too, Alexei said quietly. I feel her sometimes. When I laugh. When I remember how. She used to tell me I didn't smile enough. I think she'd be happy right now. Yeah. Yeah. He looked at Helen with something tender and terrifying. I think she'd like you. How do you know? Because you make me feel like I did before the world made me hard. When I'm with you, I remember what it's like to be just a person. Not a boss. Not a criminal. Just Alexei. I feel that too, she admitted. When I'm with you, I'm not the invisible maid. I'm not the grieving mother. I'm just Helen. And I'd forgotten what that felt like. They spent the afternoon in the living room, Helen teaching Alexei how to play gin rummy with a deck of cards she'd found in a drawer. He was terrible at it, his tells so obvious that she won every hand. "You're letting me win," she accused. "I'm not. You're just better at reading people." "That's because I spent 20 years being invisible. You learn to read people when they don't know you're watching." "You're not invisible to me." "I know." She laid down her cards. "Gin. Again. That's what scares me." He reached across the coffee table and took her hand. "Don't be scared. Easy for you to say. You're not the one with everything to lose." "Aren't I?" His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I'm risking the one thing I haven't felt in years. Hope. That's terrifying." She squeezed his hand, and they sat like that, cards forgotten, just existing in each other's presence. That evening, she let him help her cook dinner. Really help, not just stand aside and watch. They moved around each other in the kitchen with an ease that shouldn't have existed, passing ingredients, adjusting seasoning, working in tandem like they'd done this 1,000 times. "You're getting better," she said as he chopped vegetables with surprising competence. "I have a good teacher. Flattery won't improve your knife skills." "No, but it makes you smile. That's worth more." After dinner, they settled on the couch again, and this time when he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, she leaned into him. His heart beat steady beneath her ear. His hand traced absent patterns on her arm. "Helen. Thank you for letting me be here. With you. Like this. Thank you for seeing me." "Always," he promised. And in that moment, in that house suspended outside of time and consequence, she believed him. They fell asleep tangled together on the couch, two broken people finding wholeness in the spaces between each other's cracks, pretending, just for now, that morning would never come. Have you ever felt truly seen by someone? That moment when they look past your armor and see who you really are? Drop your story below. I want to hear it. Backhand index pointing down. The illusion shattered on the 7th day. Helen woke to raised voices downstairs, Alexei and Dmitri, their words clipped and harsh in rapid Russian. She dressed quickly and descended to find them in the kitchen, tension crackling like lightning between them. "Reckless and foolish," Dmitri was saying in English, clearly for her benefit. "The men are questioning your judgment. You disappear for days, you're distracted, and now the Castellanos are pushing harder because they sense weakness." "I'm handling it," Alexei said, his voice cold and controlled. "Are you?" "Because from where I stand, you're playing house while our territory burns." "Careful, Dmitri. Someone has to say it." Dmitri's eyes flicked to Helen, dismissive and cutting. "This is about her, isn't it? You've gone soft over the maid. That's enough. The Castellanos took another warehouse last night. They left 3 of our men dead and a message. Tell Volkov his distraction will cost him everything." Dmitri stepped closer. "They know, boss. They know about her. And they're using it against you." Helen's blood turned to ice. Alexei's face went blank, that terrifying mask she'd seen him wear in his other world. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting you remember who you are. What you are." Dmitri's voice dropped. "We have a shipment coming in tonight. High value. The Castellanos will hit it if they think you're weak. You need to be there. You need to remind everyone why they fear you." "I'll be there. And her. She stays here. Protected. Protected." Dmitri laughed bitterly. "She's a liability. The longer she's in your life, the bigger the target on both your backs." "I said I'll handle it." Dmitri left, and the silence he left behind was deafening. Helen stood in the doorway, watching Alexei's back, watching the way his shoulders had gone rigid with tension. He's right, isn't he? No. Alexei. He's not right. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes made her stomach drop. I can fix this. I just need to make a show of strength. Remind everyone who I am. And who are you? What? When you go out there tonight, when you make a show of strength, who are you? The man I've spent the last week with, or the man everyone fears? I'm both. No. She shook her head. You can't be both. Not really. One is real and one is performance, and I need to know which one I've been sharing a couch with. Helen, what are you going to do tonight? His jaw tightened. What I have to. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. She felt something crack in her chest. Then I guess Dimitri's right. You are playing house. Because the man I thought I knew wouldn't dodge that question. You want honesty? His voice turned sharp. Fine. I'm going to protect my shipment. I'm going to meet the Castellanos if they show up. And if they do, I'm going to remind them why crossing me is a death sentence. That's what I do, Helen. That's who I am. And the innocent people who get caught in that reminder? There are no innocent people in my world. Aren't there? She stepped closer. What about the drivers? The dock workers? The people just trying to make a living who happen to be in the wrong place when you and the Castellanos start your war? That's exactly it. Her voice cracked. You talk about wanting to be better, about Sophia wanting you to smile more, about being just Alexei instead of the boss. But when it matters, you choose violence. You always choose violence. Because that's what keeps me alive. That's what keeps you alive. I never asked for that. I never asked to be protected by blood and bodies. Then what did you think this was? He spread his arms wide, his voice rising. Did you think we were going to ride off into the sunset? That I could just stop being what I am because you make me feel things I haven't felt in years? I thought, her voice broke. I thought maybe you wanted to try. I can't. The words came out like broken glass. I can't just walk away. I can't just be different. This is who I am. Helen. This is all I know how to be. Then we have nothing else to say. Helen. Go. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold. Go be the monster they need you to be. I'm sure you're very good at it. The words hit him like a physical blow. His face went pale, then hard. You're right. I am good at it. It's the only thing I've ever been good at. That's not true. Isn't it? His laugh was bitter. I couldn't save my daughter. I couldn't be the father she needed. I couldn't be anything except what my father made me. At least when I'm the monster, I know what I'm doing. I know my role. And what role am I? The question hung in the air like smoke. He faltered. You're someone I care about. Someone I want to protect. That's not an answer either. She blinked back tears. I'm not another thing for you to protect or possess, Alexei. I'm not a territory to defend or an asset to secure. I'm a person. And I deserve better than being someone's distraction from their guilt. You're not a distraction. Then what am I? You're everything. The admission tore out of him. You're everything good I thought I'd lost. Everything light in a world that's been dark for so long. He stopped, his voice breaking. You're the first person in 3 years who made me want to be better. Wanting isn't enough. You have to choose it. Every day. Every moment. She moved toward the stairs. And tonight, you're choosing something else. I have to. They'll see weakness. They'll come for everything I have. Then let them. She turned back, her eyes blazing. Let them have your empire and your blood money and your violence. Walk away. Choose something different. Choose me. The silence that followed was crushing. I can't, he whispered. You won't. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You're just too afraid to see it. She started up the stairs, then paused. When you go out there tonight and do what you think you have to do, remember that you had a choice. Remember that someone saw you as more than the monster, and you chose to prove her wrong. She left him standing there, and she didn't look back. Alexei returned at dawn, and Helen knew by the blood on his hands that everything had changed. He stood in the doorway of her room, his expensive suit torn, his knuckles split and bleeding, his eyes hollow with something worse than grief. 3 men are dead, he said, his voice flat. 2 of theirs. 1 of ours. A dock worker was caught in the crossfire. He had a wife. 2 kids. Helen sat up in bed, pulling the blanket around herself like armor. So that's it then. That's who you are. Yes. He leaned against the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him up. That's who I am. And you were right to see it. Alexei. The threats neutralized. The Castellanos backed off. You can go home today. Back to your life. Back to safety. Just like that. Just like that. He looked at her, and the devastation in his eyes was complete. I'm sorry, Helen. For all of it. For dragging you into this. For making you think I could be someone I'm not. For... His voice cracked. For proving every assumption you had about me was right. That's not. It is. He pushed off the doorframe. Pavel will take you home within the hour. You'll receive 6 months severance pay. You don't need to clean my house anymore. You don't need to see me ever again. You're running away. I'm setting you free. By deciding for me? By pushing me away without letting me speak. What is there to say? His voice rose, desperate and angry. I killed people last night, Helen. I looked a man in the eyes and pulled the trigger because he was standing between me and my shipment. And I'd do it again. That's who I am. That's what I do. I know. Her voice was calm, steady. I've always known what you are. That was never the question. Then what was the question? Whether you wanted to be more. He stared at her, something crumbling behind his eyes. I don't know how. Then learn. It's too late for me. It's only too late when you're dead. She stood, moved toward him. You think you're the only person who's done things they regret? You think you're the only one carrying blood on their hands? I told you about Elijah. But I didn't tell you that afterward, I knew the cop's name. I knew where he lived. And for 6 months I planned it. How I'd do it. How I'd make him pay. Alexei's eyes widened. Did you? No. Because at the last second, I asked myself, would Elijah want this? Would this bring him back? Would this make me anything other than another person who chose violence? She swallowed hard. The answer was no. So I chose differently. Not because I'm better than you, but because I wanted to be. I don't have that strength. You do. You just have to choose it. And if I can't? If I try and fail? Then you try again. And again. Until one day, you succeed more than you fail. She reached out, cupped his bloody face in her hands. I'm not asking you to be perfect, Alexei. I'm asking you to try. For you. For yourself. For Sophia. For the man you want to be when you close your eyes at night. He closed his eyes then and tears slipped down his cheeks. I'm so tired, Helen. I'm so tired of being this. I know, baby. I know. Help me. The plea was broken, desperate. Please. I don't know how to do this alone. You're not alone. She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his lips, soft and gentle and full of promise. Not anymore. He pulled her close, holding on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had turned to quicksand. I'll try, he whispered against her hair. God help me, I'll try. That's all I'm asking. The diner on 5th and Broadway looked the same as it always did. Cracked vinyl, buzzing lights, coffee that tasted like history. But the people sitting in the back booth were different. Alexei Volkov, dressed in jeans and a simple sweater, looking younger and lighter than Helen had ever seen him. His empire had been dismantled piece by piece. Territories sold, operations shut down, power distributed to those who wanted it. He'd walked away from the throne and somehow survived. It hadn't been easy. There had been threats, challenges, moments when the old world tried to pull him back. But each time, he'd chosen differently. Chosen her. Chosen himself. Chosen the possibility of something more. Helen sat across from him, her hand in his, wearing a smile that reached her eyes for the first time in years. I got the job, she said. The community center? Director of Youth Programs. I start next week. His smile was brilliant, genuine. You're going to be amazing. I'm terrified. That's how you know it matters. They sat in comfortable silence, their fingers intertwined, while the city moved around them, oblivious, uncaring, alive. Do you miss it? Helen asked quietly. The power. The control. Sometimes, he admitted. But then I remember what it cost. Who it made me. And I'd rather have this quiet, this peace, this you, than all the power in the world. That's very poetic for a former mob boss. I'm a man of many talents. She laughed, and the sound filled the space between them with light. Alexei. Yes. I'm proud of you. His eyes grew bright. Say it again. I'm proud of you. For choosing this. For trying every day. For being brave enough to become someone new. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could have. But I'm glad you didn't have to. They finished their coffee and stepped out into the night, into a world that was still broken, still unjust, still hard. But they faced it together, two people who'd found each other in the dark and chosen to build something in the light. It wasn't perfect. Some days were harder than others. Some nights, Alexei still couldn't sleep, and Helen still woke crying for her son. But they held each other through it. They chose each other, every day, over and over again. And slowly, carefully, they built a life that was theirs, not defined by what they'd lost, but by what they'd found. Love at last. Unexpected and impossible and real. As they walked down the street, hand in hand, Alexei whispered, Thank you for knocking on my door that night. You knocked on mine, Helen corrected. Did I? I think it was you who opened it. Same thing. No. He stopped, turned to face her, his eyes full of everything they'd survived and everything they'd become. You opening that door, that was everything. She kissed him then, soft and slow and full of promise, while the city lights flickered around them like stars. Two broken people, made whole by choosing to see each other. By daring to hope that redemption was possible. That love could grow even in the darkest places. That it was never too late to become who you were meant to be. What would you choose? Power or peace? The comfortable prison or the uncertain freedom? Tell me your truth below. Your answer might surprise you. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.